What if she's not collecting for herself? What if she's collecting for the evil queen? Alex said. Connor's face went white and he shook his head. No, he said. What would she want with the wishing spell? It makes sense, Alex said. She couldn't deny the facts. She escaped from prison for a reason. She has something unfinished. Maybe revenge or something bigger? Something she can't complete herself. What if she needs it for the same reason we do? Connor asked. What if she's trying to get into our world? The idea hadn't occurred to Alex. She looked back at the portrait of the evil queen on the wall. She stared at the painted face and tried to find the answers in her lifeless eyes. What could she be planning? The twins heard a set of footsteps outside the chamber. The door was unlocked from the outside and someone started to open it. Quick, hide, Connor said. He and Alex jumped inside one of the bigger trunks and shut the lid, leaving it open just a crack so they could still see the room. Your Majesty, said a booming voice, man's voice, from farther down the hall, and whoever was opening the door stopped. Yes, what is it? Said a woman's voice just behind the door. My men and I have returned, the man said. We've searched everywhere, and there is still no sign of your stepmother. The twins recognized his voice. It was Sir Grant, the soldier who had made the announcement about the evil queen in the charming kingdom during the ball. Oh, said the woman. Your Highness, forgive me for asking again, but you were the last person to see her in the palace before she escaped. Are you sure there isn't anything you can tell us about that night? Any detail or clue or something she said that would give us an idea of where she was going? Sir Grant asked. I've told you countless times I don't remember anything of the sort, the woman said. I went to simply say a few things that had been on my mind, and once I had done so, I left. Your Highness, it's only a matter of time before she strikes, before she poisons a river and kills half a kingdom, or something worse, Grant said. You knew her better than anyone else. For your own safety, please inform us immediately if you remember anything else. You will be the first I inform if any memories surface, the woman said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to be alone. Sir Grant returned down the hall. The woman slowly turned the handle of the chamber and opened it. It was a beautiful woman with the darkest hair and the lightest skin the twins had ever seen. It's Snow White, Alex whispered to Connor and squeezed his arm. She wore a white nightgown and a matching overcoat. She stood in the doorway for a moment, just looking at the room before she entered it. It seemed hard for her to be in the room where so many attempts on her life had once been planned. The way she surveyed everything around her made the twins assume she hadn't been inside the room in a very long time. Snow White entered the room and locked the door behind her. She walked around the room and carefully went through all the things, just as the twins had done. She went to a stack of old books. She went through the pages of one that was black and had a large skull on its cover. Snow White flipped through its pages until she let out a tiny gasp and dropped the book. The twins could see from the open book, lying on the ground, that she had discovered the page with the recipe for a poisoned apple. She took a seat on the platform behind her and began crying, burying her face into her hands. The whole situation seemed to have taken a toll on this young woman, on this young queen. We should ask her where the coffin is, Alex whispered to Connor. Are you sure? She seems like she needs a moment, Connor said. Unfortunately, we don't have a moment to spare, Alex said. Alex slowly stood in the trunk and pushed open the lid. Your Majesty, she said softly. Snow White gasped. She was startled and embarrassed to see that she wasn't alone. Who are you? She asked. How did you get in here? Boy, if we got a nickel every time someone asked us that question, We could afford our own palace to sneak into, said Connor, standing up beside his sister. We don't mean any harm, Ms. White. We just need to ask you a question and then we'll be gone, Alex said. First, tell me how you got in here, Snow White said. The portrait, Connor said. There's a secret ladder that leads down to the second floor. Connor, don't give away all our secrets, Alex said. I know that, Snow White said. I used it when I would sneak into this room as a girl. How did you know about it? We read about it somewhere, said Connor, waving his hands like the subject wasn't a big deal. You seem like nice children, but you shouldn't be sneaking into places where you don't belong, Snow White said. These are very dangerous times we're living in. Tell me about it, Connor said with a snort. We completely agree and promise never to do it again, Alex said. We were just wondering where your glass coffin might be. Snow White looked at them uneasily. It was such a bizarre question. It was moved, she said. To where? Connor asked. I gave it back to the dwarfs, Snow White said. It was beautiful, but as you can imagine, it was strange to have that coffin in the palace. They keep it somewhere in their minds. The twins sighed at the news. The road ahead of them had just become much longer. What on earth would you two want with my coffin? Snow White asked. They looked at each other, not sure what to tell her and what not to tell her. We're on a bit of a scavenger hunt, Alex said, and we're in a bit of a time crunch, you see, because your stepmother may be after the same things we are. Snow White looked at them very seriously. Children, my stepmother is a very dangerous woman. If she is after something and you are in her way, she won't hesitate to kill you. She is heartless. If there is any possibility of you crossing paths with her, you must stop whatever you're doing immediately. A loud banging came from the door. Your Majesty, are you in here? A soldier asked. The king couldn't find you and is concerned. Yes, one moment, please, Snow White said, and then turned to the twins. You two should go. The twins nodded and climbed up through the portrait. Promise you'll think about what I've said, Snow White said to them just before they shut the portrait door. Of course, Alex lied. Snow White smiled with relief and left the chamber. The twins decided to exit the palace through the main entrance, and they were still disguised as servants. The dwarf mines are in the dwarf forests, which aren't very far from here, Alex said, looking at the map. Remember, Snow White ran there by foot after the huntsman failed to kill her. We're going back in the dwarf forest? Connor said. Do we have a death wish? We don't have a choice, Alex said. The twins camped out in a safe patch of woods near Snow White's palace and slept for the little night remaining. They hung their wet clothes over a tree branch to dry by the next morning. They began their return into the dwarf forest. Alex's bag had only one strap now, but it worked nonetheless. They walked for a good while before they found a driver willing to give them a ride. Are you sure you want to go in there? It's a very dangerous place, the driver said. Trust us, we know, Connor said. He gave the driver the coins he had found in his maid's dress the night before to further persuade him. The cart traveled down the path, past the ugly duckling pond, which Alex found incredibly amusing, and into a forest that had been logged. For miles around, there was nothing but tree stumps. It didn't make the twins sad to see all the missing trees. They had seen enough live ones recently to make up the difference. I really hope we don't run into the evil queen, Connor said during the trip. That would just suck. I just hope she doesn't already have the saber from the deepest sea, Alex said. Otherwise, we may have to cross paths with her. I wonder if she knows about us, Connor said. If she sent the huntsman's daughter to find Sleeping Beauty's spindle and the troll and goblin's crown, and they both were gone, she would realize sooner or later that someone else is collecting objects for the spell. Oh, I hope she doesn't, Alex said, and then let out a sigh. It seems like the longer we're here, the worse it gets for us. Something always comes up that makes things more difficult. Alex's face went pale and her mouth dropped open. She looked as if she had just seen a ghost. What's wrong? Connor asked. You look like you got a B on a pop quiz. He turned and looked in the direction of her gaze. In the distance, standing in the middle of the field of stumps, was a tree that, instead of growing straight out of the ground, was curved and wound in circles like a large vine. It was unmistakably the curvy tree, the one their father had told them stories about seeing when he was a kid. You're right, Alex, Connor said. Things always find a way of becoming more complex. And that's the end of chapter 15.